there's no science to back this up. There's like, this is something that just birthed, from out of its own thing and has inserted itself into our children's, into their environment. This is not this is not, something that occurs naturally, in this massive, way. There are some children that may have some, and January, you can speak to this because of your professional background. There are some children that may have experienced gender dysphoria, I believe it's called, like the original term
Sure.
of, where if you, to me, it reminds me of like anorexia, where you look in the mirror and you literally see something else. You don't feel like you are who you really are. You literally see something else. There's a distortion in your mind.
Right.
That seemed to be a very, very, very tiny percent of the population. Now it's like everybody, all these children are, experiencing, and you can't even call it gender dysphoria anymore, right? I don't even think do you?
Yeah,
like
gender dysphoria is still in the DSM.
Okay.
Statistical Manual for Mental Disorders. But what you have to understand, you just hit the nail on the head. 20 years ago, gender dysphoria was such a small, minute number. And the research that we have on that, even children who truly had gender dysphoria, where there was a mismatch, they thought, that they were either, they felt different. The vast majority, research showed us, would have outgrown these feelings of discomfort or
distress
by the time they were either reached puberty or shortly thereafter. And so gender ideology has really only come into play in the last, I would say, 10 to 12 years. And so now what we're seeing are signs of a social contagion. And the reason we're seeing that is because girls have always historically been vulnerable to social contagions for a variety of reasons. The way that they socialize, the way that they interact with one another, the way that we take on each other's pain when we're, chatting. So the girls that are all of a sudden out of the blue, I'm not talking about a child who has felt this way since he or she were 3 or 4 years old, but traditionally, gender dysphoria predominantly affected males. And now in the last 5 to 7 years, we have seen a flip where the majority of girls going into gender clinics, and I'm talking about a sharp increase, like by 4,000%, are females.
Oh my God.
And so, as a lay person, anybody looking at the numbers should be asking, why is this happening? I mean, even if you're an ally and an advocate for the LGBT community, someone that's looking just at the numbers should be curious as to why that's happening. And these are the same vulnerable girls that fell prey to bulimia, to cutting, to eating disorders in general. I mean, these are the same vulnerable girls that have low self-worth. Many have co-occurring issues like anxiety, depression, ADHD. Up to 40% of these girls are on the autism spectrum. There's a lot of really great research being done in this area right now. And so it's really important for parents to understand what their options are. And it is not affirmation only.
Can I ask you a question? So with this phenomenon, are you seeing less children come in with like the cutting and those other issues? Okay. So now it's like we have an additional. Oh God. So it's not like they're replacing sort of one trauma or one behavior with another. It's in it. So you've got the cutting now, and you've got the gender confusion, and you've got, plus whatever else.
Right. And Quisha, what I want to say is both Bernadette and I and anybody working in this field have the utmost compassion for these children because they
Absolutely.
truly are in pain.
Mm-hmm.
They really are. And I can't say for all of them, but certainly a lot of these girls are misdiagnosing the pain. And
Mm.
the reason that we know that is because some of them, unfortunately, have taken the path, and a lot of them have said and are speaking out saying, I was fast tracked. My trauma was not explored.
Mm.
None of the other issues were resolved. And I was told that if I only transition medically, that all of these things would work themselves out.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't. Many of them experience a euphoria in the beginning, like in the first
Mm-hmm.
6 months to even 2 years.
Yeah.
But then their dysphoria sometimes and their anxiety sometimes even worsens.
Yeah.
And they realize this did not fix the internal pain that had been there all along.
Yes.
So I really do have the utmost compassion for these
Absolutely.
really hurting.
I want to chime in on that in the last minute or two that we have, because
Mm-hmm.
first of all, our kids in general in the Western world, the United States, and are in pain.
Mm-hmm.
When the second highest cause of childhood death is suicide, in
Yeah.
the richest country in the history of the world, our children are in pain. There's
Yeah.
an epidemic of mental illness, generally speaking,
Yeah.
mental distress in our children. But we are talking to detransition women. We filed an amicus brief in one of our cases on behalf of detransition women. And Quisha, do the research. They're coming out of the woodwork.
I've been seeing that.
Okay, by the thousands. And unfortunately, legacy media doesn't really want to deal with it too much, but they are by the thousands. And I've spent time talking with them at great length.
Yeah.
And their stories are so poignant. I've cried with them.
Yeah.
Where Kira Bell in England, I've cried with her. Where they say, with one after the other, after the other, after the other, shared with me, I was one of those girls. I was convinced. I was a boy. I was convinced that I would feel so much better once I went through transition. All that. I was that kid.
Yeah.
I did it all. I cut off my breast, my healthy breast.
Oh.
And you know what? And I grew up a little older and in my 20s, and I'm realizing it didn't fix it. I am still in the same spot or worse.
Yeah.
And now I have pieces of me missing. And I realize now I didn't get the mental health care that I needed.
Yeah.
One woman told me I was finally prescribed, the right dosage of an antidepressant. And my world changed. It's like, why didn't I get this early on? And each one of them, the many I spoke to, is because everyone just defaulted to focus entirely.
That's right.
On my claim of gender dysphoria or my claim of being the opposite sex, and so they overlooked everything else. This is a tragedy.
It is.